Hi, it's Joanne Moffat, and I'm here to talk about developmental stages. That means child development. We're going to look at tips for guidance and expectations for each stage of development for your different places of work. Our goals include these 5 things: to develop a basic understanding of developmental stages in school settings, to have expectations for each stage with the corresponding grade levels, tips for guidance in your role, how to enhance success, and what to do if and when you have concerns. The first stage we're going to look at is early childhood, and you'll see this is ages 3 to 5, preschool through kindergarten. And kindergarten's tricky because kindergarten overlaps with this stage and the next stage because it is really a transition year going into elementary. So during this stage of development, kids are looking at developing their initiative. They're becoming self-starters. So physically, their bodies are growing so much and they're becoming much more capable of doing so much on their own. They're climbing and running and jumping and pedaling. They're beginning to be able to be more coordinated. They're throwing balls, catching them sometimes. By 5, they can typically draw a person with 4 body parts, and they can stack items. They can draw circles, and they're beginning to learn how to copy shapes like squares and write capital letters. Some are doing lowercase as well. Cognitively and academically, they can follow 2 to 3 step directions, and they're counting to 10. As they get to kindergarten, it's 20. They're beginning to understand numeracy and what numbers mean. They know most of the letters of the alphabet, and they're beginning to match and sort by color and shape. And the big thing is that they can begin to understand basic safety rules. Socially and emotionally is really a huge focus for a lot of our classified staff. And you're working with students in all different settings, and the increased ability to have cooperative play with peers is becoming more evident, although they will be still needing some coaching and problem solving and in developing empathy. And you're going to see on the playground and sometimes on buses and in classrooms, if you're in a classroom, that they're more engaged in dramatic play. For you as professionals working with these children, you want to be encouraging autonomy, because remember, they're developing that ability to be self-starters, to have initiative. So you want to be encouraging things that they can do on their own, like putting on their coats. It's quicker to do it for them, I know, but it's good to encourage them to do these things. You want to provide stimulating activities, especially physical activities on the playground. You want to be asking open-ended questions. Instead of saying, asking questions that have yes or no answers, you want to ask questions where they have to explain their thinking. So, what do you think the kids are doing on this page if you're reading a story? And how do you know? And prediction. What do you think is going to happen? And what will happen if? And then if you're in a situation where you're watching them play, so what would happen if you use this block? And how did you know what block to use? The other piece is, especially for those of you on playgrounds, you're teaching a lot about relationships. You're a relationship coach. You're teaching problem solving with iMessages. I don't like it when you do that. I feel mad. I want you to stop. That's an I message. You're teaching empathy. You're teaching feeling identification. So, teaching coping skills. Also, take a breath. And you're teaching cooperative play. You want to be able to give clear behavior expectations and redirect misbehavior. Redirection. You guys are masters at that. You want to redirect misbehavior. So you're also going to be doing the connect and correct. If a kid is running up a slide, you're going to be saying, I know the slide is so fun. Connecting. Our rule is that we go up the stairs and down the slide. Redirecting. Okay. You're going to acknowledge and notice expected behavior. The more you do that, the more that will reinforce the positive and will reinforce what the kid knows is going to get him the most attention, which is the expected behavior. And you're going to use lots and lots of language. You want to make sure you're using explaining words. You're going to be talking briefly. You don't want to go on and on. The kids will get lost. They're too restless. Their ability to sit is limited. So you don't want to be going on and on and on and on. You want to be brief, and you want to be explaining what words mean. Using self-talk is saying things like, oh, I'm taking a deep breath so I can calm my body. It's teaching kids. They're going to see what you do to calm your body, and then they'll see that that's what they can do. And parallel talk is similar in that you're going to map your actions. Like, first, I'm going to hang up my coat. Then I'm going to sit in my chair. And so they're seeing that you're mapping your behavior and you're using language, and it really helps them put that all together. Tools are things that we use with this age level. Big one is teaching what emotions are and feeling identification. This is just one simple tool that's around, and there's others like this. You could use something on the playground that's a simplified version, which is on a ring, for example, with different feeling faces. This was from Board Maker, but there's different apps out there, and it can show kids what they might be feeling. My feelings are hurt. I'm sad. Just helps kids. It's a little tool that you could use to help kids identify their feelings. And within the school itself, our curriculum, a resource that we have for feeling identification, which is a huge thing, and problem-solving skills, and learning how to play cooperatively is the second step curriculum. And all schools have this, as this is a school-wide adopted social emotional learning curriculum. So you could always access this by just asking where it is and take a look at it and see if there's any skills that you want to glean from looking through these grade level directed resources. They're preschool through 6th. The next stage that we're going to talk about today is the early middle childhood, which is 6 to 8 years old. And these are your primary grades, kindergarten through 2nd. As I said before, kindergarten overlaps with both that early childhood and then the early middle childhood. And this is where kids are entering that industrious stage of development where they're developing risk-taking. So while they're developing risk-taking, physically, they have increased abilities with their gross and fine motor. So their writing tasks are more refined. They can tie shoes. They're writing a whole lot more, especially as they get into first grade and second grade. Cognitively and academically, so much growth is happening. They are reading, they're writing. There's an increased interest in technology, rapid development in their thinking skills, and along with that, in how they're expressing their thinking. They're actively interested in learning, and they're experimenting with how things work. And while they're doing all this, they're still very concrete in their thinking. They're very literal. I often think of, books where they have to have a little inferencing going on, and that's where you're kind of interjecting what might be happening, and they're not quite there yet. They may be reading beautifully, but they don't have that next level yet because they're just not there. They're just not there yet. And socially and emotionally, these kids have increased self-regulation and that executive functioning, and that they're able to sit on a carpet longer for large group or learning time, story time, math lessons. They're able to sustain a longer focus of attention. Their friendships are more important to them, so you're also going to see some more conflicts at recess, for example. And the rules are really important. So if friends aren't following the rules, there may be a conflict, especially while playing games. Tips for this stage. This is where you want to encourage a growth mindset, especially around, being able to try on new things. Remember, they're starting with that risk taking. So they have to push themselves when something is hard, because when something is hard, you might often hear a child say in first, second grade, I can't. And so that's where we really start using those words, I can't yet, but we can work together and try this. You want to be encouraging physical activity and movement, especially if a kid gets stuck on something or is having a behavior challenge. This physical movement is a great way to get them to reset or just start over. So having a movement break would be good. Teaching the rules during this stage of development is very important, with very specific examples of what respectful, responsible, and safe, what that looks like and what it is. You're giving that to them. You're teaching them in all different settings what this looks like, what the rules look like in the cafeteria versus the classroom versus the playground, for example. Using jobs is a great tip for this stage of development. Getting kids to be feeling a bit empowered and in control during this time is it's just a really good thing in all different settings, having them be your helper. Coaching cooperative play, and this is where you want to teach about turn taking and sharing, and Kelso's wheel, which we'll look at together in a minute. Teaching problem solving, which we talked about before with the I messages. I don't like it, I feel, and I want. Teach and model feeling, identification, and empathy. So again, this is what we started in preschool, and we're going to continue with this, really being able to work with kids on recognizing what other kids feel, not just themselves, and then remembering to use the words. I always like that root word of path when I'm teaching empathy with littles, and I think of walking on a path. So we're walking in someone else's shoes, and look at their face. How do you think they feel? really helping them see that everybody has feelings. And then teaching coping skills with accountability. And so that's really helping them learn about calming their bodies and how to take a break, and using the when you do this, then this can happen. Giving choice during this time is good too, because it does help them with, being able to take a risk in becoming who they are, like making that decision. So tools. So this is Kelso's Wheel of Choice, and many of your schools have this, and you could ask for this if you'd like. But it's a frog, Kelso, and rather than just telling a student what they could do, you could have a picture of Kelso's choice. And this is great anywhere on the bus, as well as a playground or, classroom. So on here you see, here's different choices that you can do if you're starting to have a conflict. Go to another game, talk it out, share, and take turns. Ignore, and teaching when to ignore. Walking away. Tell someone to stop, especially if it's, a situation where someone is being hurt either physically or emotionally. Apologize if that's what you have to do. Make a deal. So first we'll play what you want to play, then we'll play what I want to play. Wait and cool off. And going to another game, and obviously where it starts is talking it out. This is another great resource, which is a take a break area, and many classrooms have this. And so if you're working in a classroom with a teacher who has a take a break area, that's great. A lot of times you're not always in classrooms, so you may be doing a small group, or you may be on the on the playground, or you may be on a bus. So having items that can soothe kids in a take a break or a calm zone kind of way. So these calm zones can be portable in some ways. And I have a couple things here that I just want to show you. This is a box of tools that I use. And you could even have some of these. This is just reminding kids on how to breathe. Different tools here. Obviously, it's hard to have Play-Doh on a bus, but this is something, homemade Play-Doh, that you could have available. Having a feeling book is sometimes helpful for kids to look at. This is something that a friend made. There's a marble in the middle, and this is great for a bus because you just have to feel and trace the marble through these different paths, which is like a maze. Here is a stress ball that a child made, filled with sand. One of my favorites. Whoops. Liquid in a jar, like a mine jar. Coloring. I remember when these were popular, these little fidget spinners. So these are just some tools that you could have available for kids. The next stage of development The late middle childhood, which is the 8 to 11-year-olds, this is your intermediate grades, 3rd through 5th. In here, kids, again, are becoming much more industrious and are really becoming more precise in their risk taking. They're physically more precise and more coordinated, um, and they're more purposeful in their fine and gross motor. There's some pre-adolescent growth, and for both girls and boys during this time. Cognitively and academically, their language is expanding. They have higher order thinking and moral reasoning. There's an increase in their ability to do abstract thinking. So they're not just so literal, black and white. Their humor is becoming a little bit more sophisticated. They understand more nuances, and they can, use inferences or have impressions or thoughts or guesses, educated guesses about what's going to happen next. They can complete a series of tasks, and their reading and writing abilities increase. Socially and emotionally, they're getting more and more equipped to have perspective taking, for being aware of themselves in relation to other people. They're able to have more empathy. They're becoming more flexible in their ability to perform tasks and in their routines. When things change, they don't have meltdowns. Their peers are more important to them, while they're becoming more competitive as well. And they do have a sense of morality during this time. So, tips for guidance. You want to encourage that perspective taking. You want to encourage them to be thinking about how everybody gets thoughts about each other, and that people get thoughts about us by how we look, by how we act, and the words we use. So we also want to encourage them to express their feelings. We want to coach problem solving with an emphasis on brainstorming solutions versus just giving an I message and Kelso's wheel. Now you want to move more into that perspective taking. What can we do about this? And that comes to accountability and restorative justice, that it's not just a consequence for your action. You want to help them be accountable. So restorative justice is where you're saying, so how can we fix this? What can we do differently? What should we do to make this better? What can you do to make this better? And they're involved in that process of restoring the problem versus just, getting recess taken away. So, for example, if they've hurt someone's feelings, the restorative justice piece may be, what can you, sitting with the two of them and the child whose feelings were hurt and the child who hurt the other one's feelings, and you're asking, what can you do to help this person feel better? And they may say, I don't know. And then you coach them along and say, well, ask the person who's the victim, well, what can I do for you? What would make you feel better? And it may be just an apology, or it may be, playing together, or playing a board game together, or planning an activity together, or even just drawing a picture for that child. You're going to teach and model growth mindset, and we've talked a lot about that in other trainings. You're going to teach coping skills like we've just talked about. So that toolbox that I just showed you, you're going to become a little more refined in that you'll know what the student will know what he or she needs. And you're going to talk more about how you can make a plan for each kid, or how they can make a plan for themselves on how they can cope when they have these big feelings. You're going to set limits, because that's what all kids need. Rules are important. So you have to set limits with those behavior expectations. When you're doing that, you can remind them that when you do this, then this will happen. If you do this, then this will happen. The when then and if then statements are really, really powerful tools for you to use. Establishing rules, the same thing that we did earlier with the younger kids, is very important. Respectful, responsible, safe. But then you could use a T chart where it's a brainstorming event of what respectful looks like and sounds like. Respectful, what does that look like and what does it sound like? And now, instead of you telling them, you're going to hear from them. They're going to tell you. So they're going to own it more and they'll have a better sense of what it looks like and sounds like. And during this stage, you also want to be encouraging physical activities because it's very easy for kids to become sedate and just do technology. You really want to be encouraging physical activity. Tools. Well, you may have heard about the social thinking curriculum, and we're going to do another training specifically on that. But with this, this is a tool that's used in schools around perspective taking. And I've got one here too. You can see them pretty well, but I just want to show you. I'm going to stand for this if I can. Maybe I won't stand. So in this chart, what you see is these are characters, and we call them unthinkables. And kids relate to these kinds of things because they're kind of fun. I'm not going to keep holding this to look at, but they're also relatable in that what we say to kids is that when we get big feelings or when something happens, we sometimes act like these characters. They make us not think straight. So if you just go through these, Destroyer of Fun is the guy with the bat on top, and he is too competitive. So sometimes we get too competitive. Mean Gene is when we just, we're not thinking right and we're acting mean and we're not being kind. One-sided Sid is when we only talk about ourselves. Energy Harry is when we're not thinking right and we're just too wound up and moving too much. Grumpanini, grumpy. Unwonderer, we don't think about others, just ourselves. Worrywall, we worry way too much. Topic Twistermeister is that one where we change topics. We don't stay on topic with what the group is talking about. Was funny once, we use humor at the wrong time. Brain eater, we get distracted. See how the octopus has all those different things in his hand. Body snatcher, when we move away from the group instead of staying with the group. Space invader, where opposite, where we invade each other's space, get too close to people. Rock brain, when we get stuck on our thinking, and it's when we're not being flexible. And glass man, favorite, we have big reactions to small problems. So being aware of this curriculum is a helpful tool. And then the solving problems, because we're not just using the iMessages, we want to do more brainstorming. We want to use the format, and this again is from the second step curriculum, where we're just going through what's the problem and what are some solutions, and then you brainstorm those solutions. And for each of those solutions, you say to the child or to the kids involved, is it safe? How might people feel about it? Is it fair? Will it work? Choose a solution, try it. Is it working? Great. If not, go back, try again. Now, young teens, 12 to 14-year-olds, there are middle schoolers. So again, this is our 6th to 8th graders, and they're really developing their identity. And physically, there's so much growth. And what's happening when there's all that growth? They're entering puberty. And when you're not in charge of your body, you're feeling a lack of control, right? So think about that and keep that in the back of your mind as we keep going here. Cognitively and academically, where there's an increase in capabilities and awareness of logic, kids are attempting to figure out order and organization. There's complex thinking that's going on, and their expressive skills increase so much. Socially, emotionally, while they're very self-centered or egocentric, there's also an increase in social relationships, um, much more focused on their peers, and there's a questioning of authority figures. There's an increase in moodiness, which often is directly correlated to puberty and hormonal changes. There's an increase in awareness of morality and a sense of what's right and wrong. So, tips for guidance. Remember that feeling of not feeling in control. That's so much of what's happening here with their bodies, and it kind of comes out in their feelings and in their actions. So you want to be very clear in your expectations, so much avoiding contractions. Instead of saying, don't run, they'll hear run. You want to be saying what the expectation is. Transition time is walking time. You don't want to be talking down to them. You want to talk respectfully on their grade level. So you don't want to use the same words you used in elementary school, because they're feeling like they're so old now, because their thinking is much bigger and more in depth, and they are smarter. They're just emotionally still pretty fragile, right? So you want to listen to their opinions, but not get sucked into a power struggle. So I like the term, we're going to agree to disagree. That's a really good thing that you can keep throughout the teens, by the way. You want to encourage positive choices without lecturing, because otherwise it's just they're not listening to you. And what do you know anyway, right? So you want to just be encouraging those positive choices, pointing things out so that it's almost like it's their idea. You want to keep that rule of 5 in the back of your mind. So 5 words, 5 letters to a word. I'm going to go back to the hallway. Remember, we have 5 minutes for passing time. Remember, we have 5 minutes. There's 2 more words there, but my idea here is keep it brief. You want to use the strategy of separation when you're feeling manipulated. Separation meaning you want to zip your mouth shut. Zipperation, right? You don't want to be engaging in a power struggle. If a student is trying, remember, manipulation is multifaceted attempt to get your needs met. So if a kid is trying to get something and wanting you to bend the rules, for example, you're going to just keep saying the same mantra over and over again, and maybe just not say anything more. Just keep it limited or nothing. Separate. Keep accountability ever present. So reminding a student what the rule is and disengaging. Notice their peer choices and if there's any isolating behavior, because again, there's a lot more feeling going on during this stage that's not always expressed but acted out. So you want to make sure that you're noticing if a student is being rejected by peers or getting sucked into negative behavior. You want to encourage leadership and ways to find his or her voice. So this is so important during this stage. Peers are more important. So being a healthy leader or getting involved in groups that promote leadership skills, that's really wonderful during this stage of development. So know what's available for kids on the middle school level and encourage that. Encourage those choices. Collaborative proactive solutions, we're going to do another training on this, but today I'll just say, so that's where you're saying what you notice, empathizing, and then partnering with the student to brainstorm ideas for making a choice and figuring it out together. A tool that I think is extremely important for you to be keeping in your back pocket is that it's okay to disagree, but not okay to disrespect. So where I said before, let's agree to disagree, you're going to model this. You're going to be saying it's okay that we agree to disagree, but we always have to be respectful. So it's important for you to stay calm if they're getting elevated. It's important for you to model the respect and for you to be able to teach them that you can be respectful. And it's important for you to know that when you're talking to me, it's important for you to be respectful, just as I'm respecting you. And resources. So it's in this stage of development that kids are really seeking out ways to have some control and some voice, right? So getting them to be aware of how there's so many ways of, they can be heard, and getting them involved in their school community. Restorative practice, meaning restorative justice acts that they can be involved in within their schools, how they can be modeling forgiveness with each other, how they can be involved socially in a positive way. So just knowing what those resources are within the middle school that you can tap into and that you can encourage those kids to be involved in. And then teens, 15 to 17. This is really this development of identity. And physically, females, most have completed their puberty. Males may still be growing and they're getting stronger. It's really where the difference here is for males and females. The males are getting stronger and stronger, physically. Cognitively, academically, oh man, so they're much more refined in their work habits. They're abstract thinkers. They can give reason for their choices, and they know so much, by the way. They have less patience for activities that aren't stimulating. And they have concern about their future, thinking about what's next. They may believe their ideas are the most true and that they know more than you. Socially and emotionally, they do have less conflict, though, with authority figures. There's an increase in intimate relationships and commitments. This is where you might see that first love happening, and it's real. Their self-esteem is impacted by their successes, whether it be in school, in sports, in the arts, in their peer relationships. They're defining themselves and their self-esteem. And they have less time with their parents and more time with their friends. So, tips for guidance during this time. All right, well, this is where you're a participant observer. Participant observers. What do? We listen. Listen, listen, listen. You notice. You want to be respecting their privacy. You want to be aware of unhealthy coping skills because, again, it's during this time there's a lot of peer pressure, and kids may be resorting to fitting in with a group and maybe coping with that wanting to be accepted by doing things that aren't healthy for them. So you have to pay attention to those friendship circles and their safety choices. Are they drinking, doing drugs? Um, and you want to disengage again to avoid power struggles. But while you're disengaging, you're still paying attention. Okay, that's really, really important. And you want to encourage good decision making. Your tips are your tools. You want to listen. Listen. You want to try to understand and then act. Okay, you're not alone. There's other people that you can talk with that work with this student too, and act as a unified group. Act. I love this Brene Brown quote. A resource that we have is knowing that you are the resource. You're the one that's telling this message over and over again to kids. You're the one that's aware of all the peer pressure. You're the resource. Before you were going in and looking at second step curriculum or the social thinking curriculum, you were looking at, coping skills. You were looking at take a break or calm zones, or, bringing your own tools out on the playground. Now it's you. You're not going in. It's you. You're aware of the peer pressure, and you're doing what Brene Brown is saying here, which is you're saying to kids, be you, find yourself, be all in. You're going to fall, you're going to make mistakes, you're going to rise, and you're going to try again. You're going to be that cheerleader for those kids in high school. So we're at the place now where we look at how are we going to enhance success in all stages of development, no matter where they are. First of all, you're going to know that you're going to have to differentiate, meaning that not everybody's going to learn the same way, not everybody's going to grow the same way. So you're going to have to remember that one size doesn't fit all, and you're going to have to oftentimes break things down. That's why we talk in the positive behavior intervention support about that triangle and how, we're going to give everybody the same message in tier 1. Tier 2, we're going to do a little more. Tier 3, we're going to do even more. So you're going to have to differentiate. You're going to try and try and try. You're going to remember your prevention strategies, especially the 5 positives to 1 negative, right? 5 positives to 1 negative, which is also known as 1 redirection. You're going to remember those. Keep that ever present in the front part of your head here. In order to enhance success in all stages, you also have to have an awareness of cultural differences. So what works for one culture may not work for another. Consult the experts that we have on staff and in the district. They're there to help and support you. And you want to always remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those basic needs. In order for kids to be successful, they have to come to school ready to learn. If their basic needs aren't being met, no matter what you do, it's not going to make a difference. So all kids need to have food. All kids need to have shelter and clothing. They all need those things in order to connect and to learn. Now, what do you do if you have concerns? First things first, you're a voice that matters. You have to find your voice. You have to remember that you're on a team, that you're not just a bus driver, you're not just an assistant or a paraprofessional or a playground person or a cafeteria worker. We're all, or a grounds person, we're all in this together. You all have to remember that. You want to seek to understand if a student's behavior or their abilities differ from the other kids. And how you do that is by consulting. Go to other members on your team. Go to people that work with that student, the teachers, counselors, other people, other peers. Consult. And then, if necessary, go to the SST, the student support teams, and you'll do great. You're a voice that knows this student. Take notes, bring your concerns, share them with the student support teams. And then finally, I'd like to summarize this by coming back to what is so powerful within all stages of development. Attunement. When we attune with others, we allow our own internal state to shift, to come to resonate with the inner world of another. You matter. Each stage matters, and you matter. You matter with how you attune with kids in each stage of development. You help them grow. You help them move on to that next stage. You have so much influence in their lives. Your engagement along our students' journey is invaluable. You matter so much. And so we thank you. We thank you for being part of the team that's supporting our kids along each stage of development. Thanks.